Hi, good morning. Sorry about the way we ended the last chapter. My phone rang and I tried to get it to stop by pushing the button and it just ended everything. So we're back reading Max, chapter 6, and I keep reading ahead, so it's really good. Hard, but good. With the first rays of the warm sun, the ground began to thaw. Maxie opened his eyes and shut them at once. The sun was too bright for his inflamed, dry eyes, yet he thought that he saw something that he was searching for so desperately. Right in front of him were several rough-hewn cabins and cleanly swept sidewalks. He sniffed the air and again smelled people. Different people, people in houses, like home. There was no scent of oil and gasoline, which he had smelled at the trailer camp. Then he tensed. His experience of the previous night taught him that not all people were his friends. Max was wary now. He waited, listened for harsh, unfriendly voices, but there were none. He saw people move in and out of cabins, and he called out to them, but his voice must have become so weak that no one heard him. He tried to pull himself up and crawl closer to the cabins, but no strength remained in his body. The day passed slowly for the suffering dog. Max drifted in and out of consciousness, barely aware of the passage of time. Another cold, brilliant night slowly descended upon the mountains and the giant trees. Max was dying. As the full moon finally ascended, bathing the woods and nearby cabins in its soft, cool light, Max became aware of still another danger. His keen ears picked up the sound of a pack of coyotes. Normally, Max would have answered their call with his own threatening bark, but now he just whimpered, hoping instinctively that the wild creatures would stalk some other prey. Still, the howls kept coming closer as the coyotes followed Maxie's scent. They knew that their prey was injured and followed the smell of blood dripping from Maxie's injured feet. They were mean creatures, often boldly searching for food near human habitats, unafraid of anything but the loud discharge of gunshot. They came to the clearing before the cabins, 5 of them, ghostly apparitions in the silvery moonlight. Their tails were bushy, almost like foxes' tails, not yet having shed their long winter hair. Their eyes reflected the moon, gleaming and fierce. They circled the dog, dying slowly, not ready yet to attack, but narrowing the circle of their approach, boldly ignoring the presence of human habitation. Max bared his teeth and growled, but only a rattling sound came out of his weakened throat. The coyotes knew they had an easy prey. It could be theirs whenever they wished. They howled again, one after another. Then they pounced on Max, yelping like young dogs with excitement. "I'm going to get them once and for all," a man swore inside one of the cabins. He switched on the electricity and powerful lights flooded the clearing before the cabins. The sudden brightness frightened the coyotes and they scampered in all directions. Max wanted to bark to let the man know that he was near and that he needed help, but no sound came from his dry throat. He lay panting shallowly, unable to lift his head. The man left the floodlights on throughout the night. The coyotes dared not return. In the morning, the warm sunlight somewhat revived Maxie once more. He opened his eyes and saw the cabins so near. If only he could crawl a little closer. He heard light footsteps on a path leading from the parking area. A young girl dressed in blue jeans and a Mexican blouse slowly walked along the path with an armload of bed linen, whistling as she went. She had a friendly, freckled face framed by long brown hair. Maxie could smell the fresh scent of her soap, and it reminded him of home. He whimpered, and the girl stopped. "Oh, you poor miserable creature," she said softly, placing the linen on a wooden bench and bending over Maxie. "What happened to you, boy? Are you hurt?" Maxie tried to lift his head and nuzzled her hand. He was too weak to lick her hand properly. "Poor, poor baby," the girl crooned. "You are starved." She looked at Maxie's tag and read aloud, "Max, if lost, please notify Dr. and Mrs. George Wayne. Reward." Then followed our telephone number. "You poor boy," she said, "you must have been lost. Stay here, I'll bring you something to eat." She picked up her linen and ran toward the office. Max did not want to let her out of his sight. It was the first time in 3 weeks that he had heard the sound of a friendly human voice. Sick and almost dead as he was, he still recognized the familiar words "stay" and "eat." He managed to utter one hoarse bark to let her know that he appreciated her concern, but he did not want her to leave him. He strained, trying to get up, and found that he had no muscles left to help him lift his body. He was weaker than a blind puppy. He whimpered pitifully, watching the back of the disappearing girl. She turned around quickly, and her heart went all out to the suffering dog. "Don't worry, Max," she said, calling him by name. "I promise I'll be right back." The sound of his own name quieted Maxie. Somehow he trusted her and knew that she would return. It was almost 8 o'clock in the morning of June 11th when the phone rang at our home in Los Angeles. 3 weeks and 1 day since Max's disappearance. "This is long distance. Will you accept a call from Sue Harrison?" The impersonal voice of the operator intoned when I picked up the receiver. "Sue Harrison?" I repeated and turned quizzically to my husband, who was reading the paper and drinking his coffee. He shrugged his shoulders. "I don't know any Sue Harrison," he said. "Do you know Sue Harrison?" He turned to Carlos and Francisco, who were eating their ham and eggs in the kitchen. "No," the boys shook their heads. "We don't know anyone of that name." "Ask where she's calling from," said George. "Where is the call from?" I asked the operator. "Sequoia National Park." Before she finished, I was already shouting on the receiver, "Yes, yes, of course, we accept. Put her on." Sue Harrison came on the line promptly. "Did you lose a dog?" she asked. "Yes, yes," I cried. "Do you know where he is?" "What's his name?" "Max," I shouted. "Is he alive?" "Yes," said Sue. "He is alive, but barely. He is badly hurt." By this time, George was on the extension line in the library. I was too shaken to talk. I listened on my end of the extension in the kitchen, crying, laughing, then crying again. "What happened?" the boys wanted to know. I waved them toward my bedroom, where they picked up another extension. "Yes, Max is alive, but barely," Sue was saying. She went on to describe briefly how she found Maxie and about his pitiful condition. "He has 2 broken legs and is very, very thin," she was saying. "I don't think he can survive much longer." She had fed him, shared her sandwich, given him fresh water to drink, but she felt that the dog was too far gone. "Everybody here says that he should be put to sleep," she was saying. "Put him out of his misery. But I think he has a chance. If he were my dog, I would try to save him." George begged Sue to take Maxie to the nearest veterinarian hospital, perhaps in Porterville, for it would take us at least 6 to 7 hours to reach Sequoia National Park. "We want to save him," he kept repeating. "We must." If Maxie were that badly hurt, every hour counted. We knew that we had to hurry. Without medical help, every extra hour could become his last one. Sue agreed to take the dog to the veterinarian. She told us that she worked as a housekeeper at the park and could not get away that day, but her girlfriend Jo volunteered to drive the injured Maxie down the mountain into the vet's clinic. She told us something about her friend so that we would recognize her. I did not listen. My heart was pounding with excitement. Quickly, we called telephone information and inquired about the animal clinics in Porterville. One doctor was on vacation. Another did not care to wait for our arrival, possibly after office hours. Fortunately, we found a kind, understanding person in Dr. Merrill who agreed to wait for us and give Maxie first aid as soon as he was delivered to the clinic. We phoned Sue back at the park, giving her the name and address of the doctor. That arranged. George had to cancel his own appointments. He rushed to the hospital, saw 2 or 3 patients, then asked his secretary to cancel the rest. As good luck would have it, only one more patient was scheduled, and he happened to know about Maxie's disappearance. When he heard that the dog had been found, he volunteered to reschedule his appointment so that we could go after Maxie at once. Meanwhile, Carlos and Francisco, on their own, made a long-distance call to Mexico City, begging their parents to allow them to stay with us for a few more days. We must see Maxie. We must have him checked into an animal clinic and help to care for him when he is allowed to return home. The boys had no doubt that Maxie would be all right now that he was found. It was a miracle, they kept saying to their parents. We prayed for a miracle and it happened. We must be with Maxie to make sure that he is well. We knew all the time that he would be found. We prayed for him. Neither we nor the boys' parents could raise any objections to such a complete act of faith. Of course, you may stay longer, their parents finally said, if Uncle George and Aunt Kyra don't mind. Of course we don't mind, we replied, reassured by the children's unshakable belief in Maxie's ultimate recovery. I placed several meat patties and a gallon of water into an ice chest for Maxie, and then we were off. By 5 o'clock in the afternoon, we arrived in Porterville. I don't remember anything about our driving, only the feeling of elation that we were about to see our wonderful, marvelous, valiant Maxie. We did not stop to eat along the way. George and I were too excited to eat, while the boys were happy to munch on cookies, apples, and candy bars. No one cared for food, only for time, the time that it would take to see Maxie again. We found the animal clinic located in a pleasant, rural section of town in the midst of orange groves. The air was fragrant from the blossoms, the earth hot and pungent under the warm California sun. We parked in the shade of an old giant olive tree to keep Hildy comfortable. With fear, we entered the clinic. Dr. Merrill was examining a patient, a gray Persian cat. We heard the cat hiss and spit. The doctor talked to her in a soothing voice, and the cat quieted down. The people sitting around his waiting room with various pets on their knees or at their feet smiled knowingly. Dr. Merrill is very good, said an elderly Mexican woman with a puppy on her lap. He speaks to the animals. The people around the room nodded their agreement. Dr. Wayne and his wife are here from Los Angeles, the receptionist called to Dr. Merrill. I'll be with you in a moment. Please wait in my office, said the doctor. We entered his office. The receptionist brought us 2 cups of coffee and offered lollipops to the boys. Presently, the doctor, a young, good-looking man in his 30s, entered the room, wiping his hands on a paper towel. He shook hands with us and sat behind his desk. We had x-rays done on your dog, he said. His left front paw has several broken toes. His right femur is shattered in several places. But the most serious is his general condition. He is dehydrated and very, very thin. By the way, the young lady who brought him in, she is still here waiting for you. May we see Maxie? George asked. But of course. He took us to the back of the building where there were 2 levels of cages. Almost all of them were occupied by sick animals. On the lower level, in one of the largest cages, was our Max. Or was it Max's shadow? Maxie's skeleton. Surely this pile of bones covered by a dull, lifeless coat full of bleeding sores was not our elegant, handsome Maxie, the son of champions. He was lying on his side, panting shallowly, Every one of his ribs stood out like the underpinnings of a sailing vessel's unfinished keel. His tongue hanging lifelessly out of his closed mouth, looking gray instead of its usual pink. The sticky saliva bubbled at the corner of his mouth. His eyes were shut, and except for his shallow breathing, he looked dead. "Maxie," George called him gently. "What happened to you, my good boy?" The dog opened his eyes, and we knew that he recognized us. He whimpered and tried to wag his stump of a tail. It barely moved. His whole hip was shattered, and the muscles of his entire body, and especially of his right hind leg and hip, were wasted away. Dr. Merrill opened the cage, and we bent over Maxie, all of us crying. Happy tears for his freedom were mixed with the bitter ones of sympathy and compassion. Max licked our hands with his dry, sandy tongue, uttering pitiful little cries of recognition, letting us know that he too was happy to be reunited with his family. We gave him a shot of antibiotics, the doctor was saying, and of course we fed him and gave him water. Was he able to eat? I asked. And how? Nothing wrong with his appetite. What would you advise, Dr. Merrill? Has he a chance for survival? George asked. We want to save this dog. Dr. Merrill closed the cage. Come with me to my office before you decide. I want you to see the x-rays of your dog's injuries. Passing through the reception room, we saw a young girl in blue jeans with a bandage around her shoulders and neck. It was Joe. I remember dimly that Sue Harrison had said something about Joe, mentioning that she had just broken her collarbone. I had been so preoccupied thinking of getting Maxie to the vet that I had not really paid much attention to what Sue had been saying. Now I knew. Sue had been telling us about Joe breaking her collarbone in a freak bicycle accident, and here she was, this pretty, curly-headed girl from Minnesota whose broken collarbone must have been painful, yet she drove the long, winding mountain road to bring our dying dog to the clinic. I embraced the girl and, following an impulse, kissed her. I can't tell you how grateful we are to you for saving our Max, I said. It's not me. I just brought him here. It's Sue who found him and made all the arrangements, she replied modestly. We wanted to give her a check for the $100 promised as a reward for finding our dog, but Joe flatly refused the money. No, she said. Sue and I have discussed the reward, and we decided that you would need every penny of it to pay for his doctor bills. We both love animals, and we understand how you must have felt when you lost Max. She was determined that we did not owe them anything for saving our dog. Finally, George persuaded her to accept a token of $10 to cover at least the gasoline expenses of her trip to Porterville. Fortunately, I had packed a gift for Sue that I intended to give her in addition to the reward money. It was a colorful leather shoulder purse from Mexico that I bought last year and kept as a possible present for some friend's birthday or as a Christmas gift. I gave it now to Joe for Sue as a token of our gratitude. Good luck with Max, she smiled as she started her car. He is a wonderful dog. I hope you'll be able to save him. She was gone. Not my Maxie, George exclaimed fiercely. Whoops, double page right there. Back up. What's your last name? I shouted, but Joe did not hear me. We returned to the doctor's office. It's unbelievable. The girls absolutely refused the money, I said, shaking my head in wonder. They refused $100. Kind of renews your faith in the human race, doesn't it? Dr. Merrill chuckled. It surely does, George agreed. He was looking at Max's x-rays, tracing the broken bone clearly visible in the large sheet of negative. If he were my dog, I wouldn't put him to sleep, said Dr. Merrill. I would try to save him. That's exactly what I wanted to hear, George exclaimed. I want to save this dog. He deserves to be given a chance after all he's been through. Imagine 3 weeks without food or water, with 2 badly broken legs, and God knows what other injuries. This intelligent, wonderful animal mustn't be destroyed. My wife and I, we'll save him. We'll nurse him back to health. And we will help, said Carlos and Francisco, almost in unison. Unfortunately, we don't have proper facilities to care for him, Dr. Merrill continued. Max needs special orthopedic surgery, plating as we call it. We don't have it here, but I can recommend an excellent animal hospital in Los Angeles where they have orthopedic specialists. We have dealt with them several times before in some complicated cases, and they were always very good. He called the clinic for us to advise them to expect us with our dog within a few hours. We paid the bill for Maxie's first aid and the x-rays, then George carried the dog to the car. He weighs no more than a 3-pound, 3-month-old puppy, George said. What happened to you, boy? You used to have muscles of steel. We'll end that chapter right there. Remember, it's cool to be kind. Hard work makes you feel good. And ask, what can I do to help? Make it a great day. Ciao.